that school was finally out. And he had to go through the wintertime, he had to go through the springtime, the classroom started to get hot. They took those tests that everybody has to take, and finally those were over. And then they had a couple field trips. They went to the aquarium, and then they went to the zoo, and then they went to a museum, and all that was finally over. And summer was finally here. I don't know about y'all, but one of my favorite times is summer. It's so much different than the rest of the year. Plus, we get to go to camp when I was a kid. So, Charlie was excited about summer because he was going to be able to go to see his grandpa. And his grandpa lived in a small valley out from the city, about 30 minutes, not too far away, but far enough away just that you could tell the landscape was different. Fields and barns and pasture land and fences and farmhouses. And Charlie couldn't wait to go. This year, something was different. This year, he's going to be able to take two of his buddies. So he's going to take Preston and Red with him. So they got into the station wagon, piled in, all together, and off they went. They'd all packed the night before, and they took off right after church was over. They didn't eat lunch. Off they went. As the boys were in the back of the station wagon, talking and just chattering and chattering, Charlie could see in the distance. And as he looked in the distance, he could see a mountain. And that mountain didn't look very big, and he said, "Red, Preston, look out the window, there it is." And they all put their faces against the window to look out, and there in the distance was a mountain. And Preston said, "That doesn't look very big. You described it as a big mountain." Charlie says, "You just wait till you get closer. It'll get bigger." And it did. As they drove through a variety of subdivisions to get clear of the city, and now they were out in the countryside a little bit and passed a few little country stores, like a small gas station, and then they came around a curve, and there it was. It was bigger than it was before, for sure. And off in the distance, Charlie saw the winding of the road up against the mountain. That reminded him of one thing, and that is we're getting awfully close to Grandpa and Shug's house. Now, I got to tell you that Charlie's mamaw was called Shug. And the reason they called her Shug, it was short for sugar. And it's because she was just so sweet. And Charlie loved his mamaw Shug. But as they got closer down the road and they saw the fence finally, it was a white painted fence, Charlie knew they were close. And he said, "Boys, look up there. See how big it is?" And he was right. Charlie says they call it Shadow Mountain. They call it Shadow Mountain because in the evening and the sun begins to set, it sets a long shadow all the way across the farm. First it starts on the edge of the field, creeps over a small pond, toward the fence and the barn, and finally to the house. And it just covers it with its shadow. Well, they turned it into a gravel road where the fence began and opened like a gate. And as they were traveling down the gravel road, they passed a couple outbuildings. Now, outbuildings are places where Grandpa had something stored. He might have had his tractor in one. Maybe he had some tools and equipment in the other. And then he had a big barn where he kept hay, and the cows would stay. And so they got closer and closer. And they're winding down through the farm, past everything. They came and he pulled in front of a big white farmhouse. Oh, as they pulled in and the dust settled, out from the front, through the screen door comes Shug. And she is smiling and waving her hand. She had an apron on because I'm sure she'd already been cooking Sunday lunch. And she was waving to the boys. As soon as the car stopped, Charlie couldn't wait, opened the door, jumped out, Preston and Red right behind him, and off toward the porch they went. Charlie ran up to Shug and gave her a hug. Now, hugging Shug was like hugging a marshmallow. Now, you think about it. She was so soft and squishy. And she just wrapped her arms around him and told him how much she loved him. The boys came up and politely introduced themselves. And Charlie's parents were out of the car by now, and they hugged and greeted one another. And then from around the side of the old farmhouse. In a pair of overalls came Grandpa. Now, Grandpa was a tough man. He had an old ball cap on, overalls, white t-shirt. His skin was tan, but you could just see it was like leather almost. He'd spent his life working the farm. He came up to Charlie and gave him a big hug. Charlie liked hugging Grandpa too because he smelled like leather, like a ball glove or something. And so he gave him a big hug. The other boys introduced themselves, and Shug said, "Boys, let's get in the house. Come in this house. It's time to eat." And off they went into the house. As they went into the house, they walked down this long hallway toward the dining room. And there, Shug had already set out a delicious lunch. She had, this particular day, made some fried chicken. Fried chicken. It was flaky and delicious with some biscuits, some fresh potatoes and gravy, a salad, another salad, some fruit salad, some ice cold sweet tea, and the boys ate and ate. All this time, though, Charlie was thinking about something they had talked about in the car. See, Charlie asked his dad on the way, "Dad, do you think this summer I could climb the mountain?" He'd never been allowed to climb Shadow Mountain before. Charlie's dad said, "I'm not sure." Because you got to understand there's nobody living there. Nobody lives up on Shadow Mountain. In fact, I used to go up there as a boy, and I had to be really careful because there are all types of wild animals up there. And sometimes you'll see a rattlesnake. So you have to be real careful walking in the woods where people don't go. Charlie began to think about it. He said, "But Dad, if we're real careful, do you think we could go?" He says, "Well, we'll have to talk to your grandpa and see what he says." That was floating through Charlie's mind as he was sitting at the table, because occasionally he'd glance over at Grandpa trying to get the nerve to say, "Grandpa, could we go climb the mountain?" And finally, when all the conversation kind of slowed down, there was a lull there, Charlie spoke up, leaned forward and says, "Grandpa, could I ask you a question?" His voice squeaked a little bit. He was kind of scared. He said, "Grandpa, could we climb the mountain?" Grandpa looked at him and just smiled, laughed a little bit, kind of a chuckle under his breath. "Well, you know what? Every year you've come up here, you've been wanting to climb that mountain. I'd have to ask your dad and see what your dad says." So he looks over at Charlie's dad and says, "What do you think?" He says, "I think if the boys will be careful, stay together, it should be okay." Charlie looked at the other guys, and they all were smiling. "But you got to be careful when you go up there. There's no telling what you might find." So after lunch was over, Charlie, Preston, and Red walked out the door with Charlie's parents. They loaded back in the car, and off they went, headed back to town. Charlie, Preston, and Red turned around and looked at Grandpa and says, "Can we climb the mountain today? Can we climb today?" He said, "It's too late in the day. The shadow's already coming across the pasture toward the pond near the barn. I tell you what you can do today. Let's spend some time going around the farm and check everything out. Charlie, why don't you show the guys the barn and the chickens and the pigs and the cows? I tell you what, I'll meet you in the barn, and we will go ahead and get some fresh milk for tonight from Rosebud." Rosebud was their prize cow. So the boys went down first, taking what was left over from lunch, down to where the hogs were kept. It's called a hog pen. Have you ever been to a hog pen?
Yeah.
Ooh, hog pens don't smell good. No. No. Well, Grandpa had made himself this thing for his food that was left over. He called it slop. That's what it looked like. He made a long log, it's about this long, out of wood, about this wide, about this deep, a trough. And on that, he also made this other small little wooden chute that's looks like a U. And you pour the slop in the chute, and it'd come flying down into the trough. Well, let me tell you, when the hogs heard you coming, they would come running out of the little pasture in the fence, running up to the trough. They would just talk to one another, and then all of a sudden he'd pour that slop in there, and they'd dive in it. their noses. Full nose dive. Just eating it and going after it. Before you knew it, it was all gone. But you talking about stinky. Preston said, that reminds me of a story. Charlie says, what story? He says, remember the story of the prodigal son? Where he left his parents and he went to a faraway country, spent all his money, and finally he found himself feeding pigs. And he found himself so hungry that he was even willing to eat what the pigs were. Charlie says, ooh, it's terrible. Let's go check the chickens out. So they did. They walked through the barn, and there in a pile, a big kind of bag, it said feed on the side of it. Charlie reached in and got some feed. He walked over and he threw it on the ground. Before he knew it, here comes the chickens running. And they were clucking and clattering, and there they came. They're pecking and getting everything they could get. That just made the boys laugh. They would eat, 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 eat. He says, tomorrow morning, Charlie said, we'll be able to get up early and come and get some of these eggs that they're going to lay. Fresh eggs for breakfast. They couldn't wait. Rustling in the side of the barn over there, a noise was being made. It's Rosebud. And Rosebud was ready to be milked. Grandpa comes around the corner with a stool and he says, boys, who wants to be first? It was silent. They all looked at one another. Preston says, well, I guess I'll go first. Charlie laughs and says, yeah, you go first. Red says, yeah, you go first. So he sat on the stool. Grandpa put his arm on the side here and says, now, this is how you do it. Reach in there, squeeze, and pull. Shh. Milk hit the pail. Preston says, I can do this. I've got this. He reached in, squeezed, and pulled. Nothing came out. Squeeze and pull. Nothing came out. One more time. Squeeze and pull. Nothing came out. Preston felt somebody was watching. And he looked up. With his head turned back, looking at him, it was Rosebud. As if to say, what in the world are you doing? She was upset. But Preston wouldn't give up. He reached in there and finally, a little milk, a little milk. All the boys took their turn. But it looked like Rosebud finally was getting a little relief when they all moved over and Grandpa came in and milked the cow. Before you knew it, he had a good half gallon of milk in the pail, and off he went to the house. Well, Charlie, Preston, and Red said, let's go check out other parts of the barn. So they went up into the hayloft, played around, made a fort, hid from each other. Then they went down to some of the outbuildings just to explore what was in it. But by this time, they heard a voice calling, come in this house. It was Shug, and it was supper time. And they did. Off they ran to the house, ate a delicious dinner that was prepared. Country fried steak, of course with gravy again. Nice fruit salad, some mac and cheese. Another fresh salad. But tonight, a little special chocolate pie with some of that fresh milk. Well, at mealtime, it was a custom for Grandpa to get his Bible out and his glasses. He got his Bible out and had an old worn Bible that he used all the time when he'd read, have his devotions. And tonight, he turned to a book in the Bible called Galatians. And he said, boys, I'd like to read to you and tell you a little bit of a story. So he turned to Galatians chapter 6. In Galatians chapter 6, it talks about a lot of things. But one of the things it talks about is, what do we do with our heart? What do we do with our heart? So he looks at verse number 7. He says this, do not be deceived. That means don't be tricked. Don't be thinking something that's not really there. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. We can't pull anything over on God. God knows all. We might think we can. Hey, we're just joking. We cannot mock God. He knows exactly the truth. He knows the motives behind what we do and what we say. He knows everything. Grandpa says, now listen to this. It's one of my favorites because I'm a farmer. I've learned lessons in farming. He says, a man reaps what he sows. He said, boys, if I go out and plant corn, you know what I'm going to get? I'm going to get corn. If I go out and I plant wheat, do you know what I'm going to get?
Wheat.
I'm going to get wheat. If I go out and plant a tomato seed, do you know what I'm going to get?
Potato.
Tomato. I'm going to get a tomato. Well, if I planted a potato, you know what I'd get? A potato. And then he read this. The one who sows, that means plants, his sinful nature, to please his sinful nature. From that nature will he reap destruction. But the one who sows to please the Spirit, who plants seeds to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will he reap eternal life. And Grandpa said, let me tell you kind of what that means. He says, your heart is like a garden. You have a choice. You have a choice to prepare that garden, to prepare the soil, so that whatever you plant in it will grow. If you plant, follow me now, if you plant sin into your heart, do you know what's going to come out as your fruit?
Sin.
Sin. Now let's take an example of this. If I plant in my heart selfishness, which means I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. When I have the opportunity to receive something or give something, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get what I want. That's going to be on my mind. I'm going to keep what I want. I might see somebody over here who has a need, but because of my selfishness and I've planted that seed in my heart, I'm not giving up what I have. I'm not going to share what I have. I'm not going to give somebody what I've been given. Instead, I'm going to hold on to it. If I plant in my heart mean thoughts, you know how I'm going to treat my brother, my sister, my friend? I'm going to be mean to them. Now, he says, that's why it's so important for us to understand. We plant in our heart those things that are pleasing to God, and then I'll live a life that is pleasing to Him. He says, if I sow to the Spirit, if I sow in my heart, if I meditate in my heart, love, joy, peace, long-suffering, patience, goodness, self-control. If I plant those things, you know what I'm going to be like around other people? I'm going to be patient. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be loving. I'm going to do good to them. I'm going to show I care for them. Listen to me. I can't plant sin in my life and expect the fruit of the Spirit to come out in my life. It won't happen. It's the same thing with us. And Grandpa looked at the boys and said, what are y'all planting in your heart? Charlie began to think. He remembered disobeying his parents the other day, and remembered that he tried to cover up what he did by not telling the truth, and it got him in bigger trouble. So he planted in his heart lying and untruth, and it came out when he tried to cover up what he did, and then he got disciplined for it. It wasn't a good day. And that's how it worked itself out in his life there. And he says, Grandpa, what do we do when we sow sin in our heart? And Grandpa says, I want you to know God has made a way for you to come to Him and to ask forgiveness. You know what? He said, Charlie, God wants to forgive you. He wants you to come to Him. because that shows that you've humbled yourself and you're laying your heart before Him. But he says, Charlie, you got to understand, God wants you to replace that non-truth, that lying, with the truth and live that way. And that troubled Charlie a little bit, because he wanted to be one that sowed to the Spirit so that he would bear the fruit of the Spirit. Boy, Grandpa was a farmer, but he was a wise old man. He sure knew something. As the boys got up from the table and helped clean, put everything away in the kitchen, Charlie gave Sugar a hug, told her he loved her. And off the boys went upstairs. They walked down the hallway to a set of stairs that winded up into the house, a little gable in the house. That means kind of a corner of the house on the second floor that they had made a bedroom. It had one window to it. It had a couple beds with quilts everywhere, a chest of drawer, pictures of the family. And Charlie always liked to sleep next to the window, because that's where the cool summer breeze would come in. As he sat there, he looked and he stared up at the mountain. The boys had finally drifted off to sleep after making a few jokes and laughing. As they laid there, Charlie's eyes began to close and then they'd open back up. This time, though, when it opened back up, Charlie looked toward the mountain. And as he was looking toward the mountain, he saw something that he never, ever had seen before. In all the time that he's ever been to Grandpa's house and had slept up there, he looked and he couldn't believe his eyes. Because right there, well, tomorrow we'll find out what was right there. Hey. Now let's remember and let's think it through. What's in our heart?